way to the top. We got so far to go, even farther back to home. So many times we could have stopped when we got stuck in the mud and we felt like giving up. But this is our road, and y'all are my people. No matter where we go, never alone. No, we're not gonna stop till we get to the peak. Going high, high, high.
Hi, and welcome back to Notes from the Healing Field podcast. I am your host and guide. I am super excited that you're here with me on episode 5. We've got a lot to cover, but I wanted to start out with a recap of everything we've done thus far. I want to remind you that at the beginning of this podcast, I mentioned each episode is meant to build on each other with the ideas and concepts so that we are literally and figuratively ascending a mountaintop together as we dive into all this beautiful information. So I wanted to remind everybody where we've been and talk about where we're going to go today. So just to recap the episodes 1 through 4, first one was base camp. So we talked about a lot of beautiful language around self-healing, healing in general. We talked about what it means to want to integrate through healing, what it means for you long term. So check out that first episode. So episode 2, we talked about why we go on this healing journey. So many of us have different entry points to why we even want to start healing, whether that's in community or with ourselves or in both places and through different modalities. So that episode is talking about like, why would I want to go on this journey? Many of us come through here because the pain is too much. The pain is too excruciating. The separation is too painful to deal with. My entry point into healing was I had some deep trauma living inside of myself through the entirety of my life. And then at a very pinnacle and turning point in my late 20s, that I just thought I really need to figure out how to deal with this pain because it's manifesting in not great ways. And I wanted to make sure that I didn't injure myself anymore, mentally, physically, spiritually, all the things, and that I didn't injure my ecosystem as well. So when I decided I'd had enough, I went on this journey, and I have also done a hybrid version of healing. So I've done it in community and therapy. I've done it through self-healing and self-rituals and practices, and really aligning myself with my Buddhist practices that help me stay in alignment and in a non-violent form of communication and community with other people, which helps me on my journey. Episode 3, we talked about some really important topics, which was creating and cultivating self-awareness and staying in deep presence. So that what we want to do is when you're going on this healing journey, when you're revisiting old wounds, it's important to anchor yourself in the present moment for 2 real big reasons. Number 1, you want to make sure that you feel safe when you're revisiting those wounds, but also because you want to make sure that you have the awareness to work through everything. So we are reminding ourselves about the past, but then we're using the present to heal them so we can change our outcome in the future. And it's this beautiful forward trajectory that we can do with one another and with ourselves. On the 4th episode, we talked about the ego, the identity, and the story. And in that, we talked about how in the healing process, our ego is motivated to stay in our stories, in our narratives about ourselves, or our identity, whether that's our marital status, our physical attributes, our intelligence, and what the world thinks about us. And if we need healing and any of those things are at risk of changing, sometimes our ego will sabotage us and not allow us to feel the fullness of healing. So we talked about that. So that's where we're at so far. And we're going to go up another sort of 1.5 miles up the mountain. So this week, what we're going to be talking about are 2 things. And the first thing is about how disorienting the healing process can be. And I want to offer you some real resources and tools to move through this. And then another really important topic, which is the illusion and delusion from the external world that we're not okay because we're seeking healing, or even at worst that we are broken in some way. So we want to dispel both of those things. I'm going to give you some specific examples, and I'm going to give you a lot of deep and beautiful, compassionate reassurance that you are okay right now. And to remind you throughout this entire episode, there is nothing wrong with you, and I'm right here with you as you work through all of these. And you've got this. You are on the right track, and it's beautiful. Okay, so talking about the first topic there about how hard it can sometimes be to go on this journey and how disorienting it can become, and sometimes even like spiral out of your own control at certain times. One thing that can happen here, that often happens when we create internal healing, is our external world changes because we are interacting with that world in a different way. So when you start modifying who you are as a person and you begin to reject the systems that could have caused you to need to be healed or have caused you injury, those systems, then start to wobble around you or agitate. And those systems can be anything. So when I say systems, I mean like your familial system, your work system, your system with your siblings, your system with your romantic partnerships, your system with your work relationships. As you start to reject those systems because you want a different outcome and you want to feel healthier, you want to increase your mental health, there will be some resistance for your external world. And I think this doesn't get enough attention when we go on the healing process. And it's one of those things that really can disrupt and also make you want to give up on your own healing a lot of the times, because people don't want change. They don't like change. And if you're disrupting a system that is going to challenge how you present in that system, it can really mess up for everyone. And again, I'm not saying that to discourage you. It's just the opposite. All we're doing here is to encourage you to find the strength, the resilience, and the fortitude and the patience to get through that wobbliness that can happen, and that is awkward and uncomfortable, and it can be itchy. It's not real fun to go through that part, but it's necessary. It's also necessary because we'll talk about this more in the boundaries, is that we are basically creating a new way of being with ourselves and with others. And so boundaries have to be readjusted. The way we relate to one another has to be readjusted. There's this whole sort of checklist that changes. And again, that can be uncomfortable for you and for other people. So the real takeaway is I don't want you to focus on the negativity of what could happen. I want you to focus on your internal strength, resilience, and fortitude to move through whatever is coming your way. That might make you want to give up on even going through the healing process. So I want to say that. Okay, another thing I want to say about the uncomfortableness of changing and healing is that when it causes tension, another thing to think about is we are all under these invisible social contracts with the people in our lives and our work ecosystems, and even societal contracts, right? So anytime anyone goes outside of the norm, that is really looked upon as not great. So even though your intention to heal is about you, the outside world can be threatened by that. And so it's important to remember that when you're coming up against people who could be angry or agitated or cause, tension between you, you just, it's really hard for people to accept that you're changing. And then one thing I want to layer on here and put into your consciousness, especially if you are being wounded in systems and you take a stance to elevate from that wounding, number one, by healing, number two, by putting a stop to it, those people that have wounded you, that's going to be very difficult for them to accept. So you have to go into this with a lot of deep internal strength to be able to overcome the pressure you might feel in those situations when you want to move away from that wounding, or even if the wounding happened a long time ago and you're addressing it and they take it personally and they feel like it's about them. It's not about them, it's about you. And really anchoring yourself in the fact that you need to do this for yourself and that you can get through it no matter what. So one way that you can address this is to set really clear boundaries around the people that are feeling agitated or itchy about this. And trying to understand your own pliability in this, and understanding your own comfort zone of where you feel people are safe for you as you're navigating this new space and as you're healing and changing and growing and having more information come to light that gives you clarity about the situation, about yourself. And that can be very weird. So I want to show you a little graphic that I drew myself, a visual aid that was presented to me a long time ago. It's a great visual aid to help you understand how to navigate boundaries as you're healing and changing and growing and learning to anchor yourself in your own strength and your own ability to say no and your own ability to want a different outcome, okay? So if you think about a labyrinth that has, an entrance or a maze, this is what it is, okay? So you have yourself right here in the center. That's you. And as people are safe and they love you and they don't harm you, this is where you want to keep, you can keep people in there with you. You don't actually have to. Now, one thing to point out here, there's an opening so people can come in and out of this as you deign. They are allowed, okay? So this is all your call. Now, the second rung right here, we could imagine this would be family members, romantic partners, siblings, people who have our best interest at heart, who love and respect us, who treat us with dignity and respect. They would be there, right? Then we might have our friends on this outside rung. And as we initiate closeness and intimacy and trust, people can move in and out of these rungs, okay? And you are the one who gets to decide who moves in and out of these, okay? Out here, you might have acquaintances, work friends, people you know on social media. You don't really know too much about them. Now, the closer somebody is in this rung to you, the more access they have to you, the more intimacy they receive from you. So you want to be thinking about that. And the reason I show you that visual aid, because it was really important for me to understand. I know a lot of us can feel this way early on when we're creating our own self-healing, and you have to create boundaries with people because you are basically saying, I'm not participating in this thing anymore. I'm not participating in this cycle of hurt or dysfunction. And that can be like getting out of the dysfunction of an alcoholic family or a family with addiction or a family with physical abuse, that you're saying to yourself, I'm not going to participate in that thing any longer. And instead of people understanding about it, if they're in that dysfunction, they will rail against it and try to push you even harder. If you've listened to my other podcasts, I have told this story before, and it's really important to understand the story from the context of how you heal in parallel. If you're in dysfunctional systems, that you are railing against that system in order to create your own healing. So I'll just really quickly explain here. So when I went through the spiritual awakening in my late 20s, I realized that my marriage was not right for me. My religion of origin was not right for me. And I started to question everything. And as I started to question things, memories of past abuses, past trauma started to circulate because I started questioning things, and that really opened me up. And so I started to take part in my own self-healing through therapy and meditation and a yoga practice and going to an ashram and all of these things. And my family was very upset with me about leaving my marriage and also leaving the Catholic Church. They had a lot of things to say about this. And I'm not just talking about my immediate family. I'm talking about my extended family, my church community, people I didn't even really know. Like, everyone took it very personal. So I was trying to have an honest conversation with myself and with other people and saying, these things hurt me. An example of that would be when I was really young in my religious experience, we were forced into religious acts that I know now for myself were not appropriate for children. And I wanted to have conversations about that with people. And then I realized, since they were still in that system, they were not going to be an active participant in helping me unpack this. And that's okay, right? That's okay. They believe in those things and that's their system. That's okay. That's what they want for their lives. But for me, what I realized is if I kept having conversations with them, the wound would never heal. It kept staying open. So then I realized not only can I not talk to anybody in this old system about where I'm headed to a new system for myself, I'm continually rewounding myself, and we don't want to do that. So when I talk about those boundaries, you want to think about, at some point you have to make that decision whether you're going to keep somebody in that center rung with you or pull them out a degree so that you're not rewounding yourself. That's so important on the healing process, because you have to think about these spiritual, these mental, and these traumatic wounds as analogous to a physical wound. So a physical wound needs air, it needs space, it needs antibiotics, it needs medication. So you would be thinking about applying multiple tools to your own wounding. So that would mean space from other people. Medication could be in the most severe cases, real medication, anti-anxiety medication, whatever it is that you need for your particular system. Medication can also look like a meditative practice, like rituals, time in nature, journaling, all of these things. So you would be wanting, literal oxygen, breathing, breath work to help you move, this physical trauma out of your body as well, if that's what you're dealing with specifically. So you would be thinking about applying all of those things as well. So like tools, just like you would to a regular wound. And sometimes you have to do that and move people out of the rung, apply the tools, and then recalibrate later as people show you and model behavior that is not wounding to you in your current life as you're trying to heal. So that's what I want to say there. We'll definitely talk a lot more about this later on in the podcast episodes. I want to move on, for the sake of time, is about the illusion and delusion of healing. Again, all of this is because when we go on this healing journey, we're interacting with other people. So I really want to set you up for success here about what you will encounter on this healing journey. We are a species that relates to one another. We're relational. So unless you're like a person that lives by yourself and you never come into contact with other family members or work people, there's going to be relational systems and people that you come into contact with that could be, triggered by what you're experiencing through your healing process. So I really want to set you up for success to be able to handle all of that. And one of those things is the illusion and delusion of healing. And the illusion of healing is some people just don't believe in it, right? And it's one of those things where they don't believe in it because the dysfunction internally within them is so deep. And they haven't even been able to address their own wounding. And I've said this on every episode, I think, of this podcast, and I've said it on my other one. If you're a human being who has had interactions with other human beings, it is possible there has been wounding there. Now, it doesn't mean that there's always deep or traumatic or heartbreaking wounding, but we still are not doing a great job of relating to one another in a very soft and compassionate, nonviolent way. But I'm here to help you do that in your life moving forward. So the illusion is people can be very dismissive with you about your own healing. They could be like, I don't believe that, or like, why do you need that? Or, whatever people want to say. And what I want you to take away here again is not the negative. I don't want you to be turned off by the fact that people may challenge you by not believing you. What I want to encourage you is to come back into the center of your being and remember that you're honoring for yourself what you need in order to be a whole integrated human being or soul having a human experience on this earth. That's for you. And no one can tell you what that experience is except for you, no matter how hard they try to tell you. And people are uncomfortable with the healing journey because you become a mirror to people's own suffering. This is another thing no one really talks about so much on the healing path, but it's true, and it's uncomfortable, and it's itchy, and it's just uncomfortable. I can't think of a more sufficient word to say it. Because when people start asking you about your healing, if you are candid with them about it, it starts to bring things up for them, and maybe they're not ready to look at it, and that's okay. We have to honor the dignity of everybody's process all the time. So, and that's a very non-violent way to be with one another. You know, I am a full believer that we are all waking up in our own time. We're all healing through our own processes as more information comes to us, as the pain gets harder to suppress, that we are waking up and we are healing. So we allow those people the dignity of their own process, even if in that moment they're bypassing it. The other thing I want to say here about the delusion of healing is that it's possible that people will come to you with judgment about you wanting healing. And so they can say things like, oh, do you think you're broken, or are you damaged? I absolutely hate both of these words in the vernacular of healing. I feel like, first of all, what I know to be true of my own experience and of all of the healers and alchemists who I have had the luxury of interacting with on earth is that it's not that we're broken. It's not that we're damaged. It's that we are conditioned into thinking we're broken and damaged. And there's a lot of systems in place that really get a lot out of us believing that we're broken or damaged or less than or not enough or not beautiful enough or skinny enough. There's a lot of systems that are really benefiting from us believing that we're not whole human beings. Now, why are we whole human beings? Would you say? We're whole human beings because we land on earth outside of our mother's wounds as that. I have this long metaphor that I wrote in my book, The Alchemy of Kindness, of the idea that we are all these puzzle pieces, and they're all disjointed puzzle pieces when we come to our adulthood. And some are sticking out and some don't match, and some are too big for our body. And we come into this world as a full, whole jigsaw puzzle of a human being with unique abilities, ways of viewing the world, with love and compassion and kindness and joy and adventure and just unfiltered beauty. That's how we come here on earth. That's how we enter this world that way. And the world in the form of our family, our friends, our life experiences, they start to take out those puzzle pieces because maybe your puzzle piece doesn't look like your family's puzzle piece and they don't like that and they don't want you to be weird. So they stick in one of their puzzle pieces, or your church does, or your boyfriend does, or your girlfriend does, or your work does. And by the time you become an adult, you're all these puzzle pieces that don't belong to you. And part of the spiritual journey is going and finding those beautiful puzzle pieces and putting yourself back into wholeness, because you were always whole. It's not that you were ever lacking wholeness. It's that you came into this and people move those jigsaw puzzles around. But you were always a whole, beautiful, loving human being. I can't express how much all of us are this at any given moment. We've just started to believe what society, our family systems, religious institutions, work, all of the academia have told us we aren't. So I want you to think about that for yourself. Okay, I want you to anchor yourself And I want you to even say it as a mantra if that works for you. You know, I am whole. There is nothing wrong with me. I am not broken. I am fully expressed as a human being. I have everything inside myself that I need to heal. So we want to approach our healing from an empowered standpoint. It's hard to address anything from a disempowered state, and it also sows doubt in what you're doing, correct? So when we think about coming to our healing from an empowered state of knowing we're already whole, we've just forgotten how whole we are. We've just forgotten the beauty and the sanctity and the sacredness of who we are as a human being as we've come into adulthood. And as the beautiful Don Jose Ruiz says, we are domesticated. We're domesticated outside of ourselves. So we want to break that domestication in our healing and the delusion that if we go on this healing journey, that there is something wrong with us. I can't say it enough. There's nothing wrong with you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. You are a whole, beautiful, sacred human being. And you are here to uncover everything about yourself. And I'm super excited to be doing this with you. All right, one more thing I want to hit on here is that when we create our own internal healing, the most useful way to become an integrated human being is to relinquish all of those ideas of the brokenness and the damage, all of that. And one of the beautiful things that is so counterintuitive, and there are a lot of paradoxes and counterintuitive thinking that happens when you go on a healing and spiritual journey, that it appears that there would be one specific outcome, but actually it's just quite the opposite. And this is the beautiful byproduct of going on your own healing journey. I'm going to tell you what that is. It is the fact that when you go on this healing journey, the more integrated you become, the kinder you become to yourself, the more compassion and stillness you have inside yourself, you start to build your own internal empathy that you have. Then you can actually turn that outward to the world. And instead of being agitated or have that tension with the outside world, you're able to see with such beautiful clarity how much the world is suffering and how much the world does not see their own suffering. Again, because we talked about how people you become a mirror and people don't want to look at it. And that's fine. That's their stuff. The other thing that is their stuff is what's hurting them in that moment, and that you have clarity to see, oh, I think they could be hurting. I feel like this is what's happening here. And that gives you a lot of grace and empathy towards them. And while you're healing, you're building so much beautiful empathy for yourself and for what you've gone through. And as you heal one thing after another, and as you create your own rituals and practices to address the things that trip you up or have caused you problems in the past, or obstacles that have gotten in the way of you connecting with other people, you can see other people's stuff, but not in a judgment way, because we're not doing that here or ever or anywhere. We're looking at people with crystal clear, compassionate empathy is how we're viewing the world. And then because we can do that, we don't have to take personal how people treat us. That is a deep reflection of what is living inside of them. And we can release ourselves from the propensity to want to engage, on a low level if they are coming at us or agitating us or going off on us. It begins as you heal and as you let things go. You recognize how much people are holding on to things and the stories that they've been telling themselves and what their ego likes about it and how victimized they are. And you can say, I see that person as they are. I see they're hurting. And I don't have to engage with that hurt part. The best, most loving thing I can do right now is to let them pop off, if that's what they're doing, and go on your merry way and don't take it personal. And we'll talk about that as well. Not taking things personal is a huge, huge part of this journey. It's part of the spiritual journey. It's part of the human experience. Again, because we are relational beings, not taking things personal is part of elevating yourself into a different level of understanding humanity and yourself. And it's also part and parcel of how people project what they're feeling inside, and it has nothing to do with you. Okay, so we covered so much there on those two big topics, and I appreciate you sticking with me through most of this episode on this week's teaching. So I want you to think about everything we talked about today. I'll put some questions to do in your journal prompts after this episode is over. I'll add some resources in the link below as well. And make sure that you subscribe, rate, review, and send this podcast to somebody who needs to hear all of this. Rack up some good karma by doing that. And I really appreciate you guys being here with me today. And I love you, and I wish you well on your journey. And I know that you've got this. Bye. This podcast was written, directed, and produced by me, your host, Krista Xiomara, in alignment with Light Casting. Original song, Sword, composed and produced by Sync Hits, with lead vocals by X. Rack up some good karma by sharing this podcast with another self-healer. You can find Notes from the Healing Field on all social media channels and YouTube. Head over to your favorite podcast app and subscribe, rate, and review.
All the small wins give us hope, little signs to let us know that we're not so far away. We're gonna make it to the goal. Cups dry, but our hearts are full. So let